Hello, and welcome to Purposely Vintage. I'm your host, Virginia Jones. Thank you so much for listening each and every week to the episodes that I post on Substack. So, I'm going to be talking today about a book that really captured my heart and caused me to stop and think, and I learned a few lessons from it. And so, myself and several other ladies, we have started a book club featuring books that are cozy, that are free of sex and gore and profanity and all the junk that goes along with a lot of books today. And so, this book that we chose, it really captured an essence with me. And so, if you've ever had a book that has just made you stop and think and really evaluate things, it ends up being a great book. So, grab that cup of cozy and listen while I discuss the book Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Hi, and welcome to today's episode. So, if you are new to my podcast, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you stick around, grab that cup of cozy, and listen while I chat today. So recently, actually, it wasn't too recent, month or two ago, I think. Um, we started, friends of mine and we started a book club. And the reason we started the book club was because I do have a library in town and they do have a book club. However, their choices of books are not something that I feel comfortable reading. I did join the book club for a short period of time. And then when it came to choosing a book, the book they chose was very inappropriate reading. It was like, okay, I'm not reading this. I can't, as a Christian, read this because I do have certain convictions. I do feel like there are certain things that we should not be putting into our minds. And so I got to thinking about starting my own book club. So I have a few ladies, some I work for, some are friends of mine, and I put it out there about starting a book club, and they were really interested. And I told them why I wanted to start it, and they were definitely interested. So we have a small book club. I think it's 3 or 4 ladies. And the rules for the book club for choosing books is it needs to be free of profanity, free of sex, free of gore, free of any dark themes, things like that. And so our first book was Little Women. And so this month we are reading Jane Eyre. So we are really enjoying having the book club. And I think it's really spurred people to get into reading where they hadn't really taken the time before to read. So I'm going to just give like an intro or something of what Little Women is. So if you've never read Little Women, it is by Louisa May Alcott, and it was written in 1868. Now, Louisa May Alcott's father and mother, I think, and I'm probably going to butcher this word, but it's something like transcendentalist or something like that. And he kind of had this idea of building a utopia where everybody shared everything and everybody worked together to try, to grow crops and share, their surplus or whatever with everybody. Well, if we lived in a perfect world, it might have worked, but we don't. And so it was a short-lived experiment, and yeah, it ended up not panning out. But her writings, and she has several other writings. I think Joe's Boys, something, I don't know, something about cousins. I can't remember exactly. But in this book, she took this small family and she goes through each of the characters and explains different things about them and all the different trials that they go through and how they grow and they learn to mature and everything. So in the book, there's the father who he's off to Civil War, and I believe he works in the medical field in the Civil War. There's Marmee, the mother. There's Meg, who is the oldest, and then Joe and Beth, and then finally Amy. So Beth is kind of like the more frailer of the children in the family, and Amy, of course, being the baby, you know, she expects certain things and kind of gets daunted, kind of babied a little bit more than everybody. Lori, who is the neighbor next door, and then there's Mr. Lawrence, who is his grandfather. And so we chose the book because, of course, it's free of all the junk. It's a classic, and it's just something that I think enriched our book club. I think it enriched the members of the book club. So some of the lessons that I learned from it, I'm just going to go down through and just tell you why they kind of resonated with me. So the first one is they were not afraid to recognize their weaknesses. So on Christmas Day, Marmee gives the 4 girls the book Pilgrim's Progress for a Christmas gift. And they go through, and you know how the character in Pilgrim's Progress, he's carrying loads and he's learning how to unload his burdens, and he's growing in his Christian walk. And as they're reading this book, they begin to see their different burdens. So I just went down, let's see. Okay, so Meg she's kind of tempted by pretty things. She wants a fancy house. She wants to be beautified. She wants to be really pretty and have everything just nice and rosy. Beth is detested by housework. She doesn't like doing dishes. She doesn't like doing housework. It's kind of her burden, as in the Pilgrim's Progress. It's kind of her burden to bear. She becomes cross sometimes when she has housework she knows she's got to do. Joe wanted to be the brother or the man of the family, and she was unsettled for the fact that she wanted to go do things. She wanted to be doing, and instead she's doing these piddly little things at home, and she's doing the menial things, I guess that's the word to use. And so she really wants to go out there and make a difference and do great things. And so she's kind of unsettled in wanting to do other things besides what she's doing. So Amy is too focused on herself. You know, her nose is not exactly right, and you know, she maybe wants to be a little taller, or she wants to be more pretty. And so those are different things that they carry. And so for myself, you know, I have certain things, certain burdens that I go through life with. Like, I would love to be a little bit prettier, maybe a little taller, like to lose weight. There's certain characteristics that I have sometimes that I don't really want to have. You know, I get really frustrated easily, or I might get angry easily about something. And I want to be of a calmer kind of characteristic, you know. And so those are certain things that we work on in our lives. You might find yourself wanting to go out and do great things and being stuck doing the menial things. And so in that, we need to take those small things and we need to learn from them. We need to learn from our burdens and mature and grow. And that's what each of the daughters were doing. They were learning to grow as they were recognizing each of their weaknesses. So they weren't afraid. Number 2, they weren't afraid to make sacrifices. Now, this was during the time of the Civil War. People were homeless. They were going hungry. They were struggling in, you know, their finances and trying to keep things going while their men and their husbands and their sons were out fighting, for our country. And so you have one scene where Christmas morning, the table's all laid out with some succulent foods, and they have oranges and they have sausages, and they talk about all the great meal they're going to have, all the things they're going to have for breakfast that morning. And the cook who is living with them, who cooks their meals and everything, she was stating how Marmee had gone out to a family who was a lot less well off than this family. And so Marmee comes back and she asks her daughters if they're willing to make that sacrifice, because there's a family who doesn't have much food. They're cold. They're living in a shack. And so the family decides, okay, we're going to make that sacrifice. And so each of them gathers up the things that they really were hoping to eat that morning, the bread and the sausages and the oranges. And they gather blankets and all that. And they go and they take their breakfast to this family that wasn't doing that well. And so they weren't afraid to make those sacrifices when it was called upon. And after a short period of time, the father in the story, he ends up getting injured. And so they've got to make another sacrifice. And so Jo, who is wanting to do great things, she's trying to figure out, what can I do? What can I do to help my father? What great thing can I do? And one of her better traits or better things about her was her hair. She had really long hair, and she went and had it cut and sold her hair so that she could pay for the train ride to get to where her father was. Oh, and I forgot one character. There's Aunt March, who is the patriarch kind of the family. And she's more the rich, aunt who she kind of dotes a little bit on the girls. Jo is her companion for a short period of time, and then Amy becomes her companion. And so she ends up paying for Amy eventually to go overseas and learn painting and several things. And Jo is hoping that her Europe, she's going to be able to go over there. Unfortunately, she doesn't. But you'll see as you read the book that Jo does end up going and traveling someplace, and she's really going to be able to do some great things. And so they faced the sacrifices they need to make with fervor, with courage. And you see that in the book, that everybody is making sacrifices during this time. So number 3 is they face challenges with confidence. Okay, so I want to go back to number 2. What things in my life, what things in your life have you sacrificed for the good of others? And there have been many times when we have bought groceries. We've taken time out of our schedule. My husband used to work in the jail ministry, and he would take time out of his busy day to go and minister in the jail. We took funds out of our budget to go and buy other people groceries who we knew weren't doing that well. We've taken in and we've done ministry for other people. We've gone to the nursing home. We used to go and do a nursing home ministry. And so we went and we made this sacrifice each Sunday or each Saturday. And we went and we sang and we preached and we visited with people in the nursing home. And so we've tried to do those things throughout the years. We used to have a tradition where we would invite someone to Christmas or Thanksgiving who didn't have any family. And so we would do that every Christmas and Thanksgiving. So they face challenges with confidence. Meg, she became a new mom. She eventually gets married. She becomes a mother. And so, in all of her rosiness and all of her wanting to be beautified, she matures and realizes that she really does love the simple things. She realizes that, she would like to have a pretty silk gown and she would love to have those things, but it costs a lot to do stuff like that. And back then, it costs a lot of money to buy silk gowns and all this stuff. When your husband is on a limited income, that isn't always possible. And she does make a purchase in the book, and kind of taxes their budget a little bit. But they work through those things. Her and her husband are working through those things. And so she becomes a mother and she's raising her children. And even when times are uncertain, she's facing it with confidence. She's facing those things with courage. Beth's illness, she ends up getting scarlet fever. And she becomes even more feeble. But she has courage. And in the movie, if you've ever seen the movie with, I think it's Winona Ryder, I think is the one who plays Jo. If you've seen that movie, there's a part in the movie where she knows she's dying. Beth knows she's dying. And she faces it with courage. She tells Jo, "I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I want to have courage. And I haven't always been like you and my other sisters, but in this, I'm courageous. I'm okay with facing death." And so it is kind of a pause point in there where it's like, oh, you're crying. It made me cry at that scene when she knows she's dying. It was really crazy. So when Amy goes to Europe, Jo is all of a sudden left with, what do I do now? Because she was the companion to Aunt March, but now Amy became her companion, and she was hoping to go to Europe to see great things and to do great things. But Aunt March ends up bringing Amy with her to Europe. And so now Jo is in a place where she's stumbling and she's not sure what she wants to do. And she's all the time making mistakes, and she's all the time fumbling with the words she says and things like that. So, Marmee has a friend who lives in New York. And so Jo goes on her adventure to New York. And I'm not going to give it all away, but in that, she's spreading her wings and she's realizing, I can do something. I have a talent for something. And if you read the book, you'll see what that talent is. And, it takes courage, though, for Jo, because she's stepping out. She's stepping away from her home. She's going out into the big world, and she's going there and growing in maturity. And, she's realizing that life is adventurous, and it's how you make it, really. And isn't that true? Our lives are really what we make them. If we want to do great things, we need to put the time and effort into doing great things. If we want to live a simpler life, it's okay to say no to the world and live a simpler life. And that's really where I'm at in my life. I have chosen to say no to a lot of things. I live simpler. I want to be home more. The big world out there is crazy. And in the times that we live in, and it may have been that way in the times, that Jo and March and Jo and Meg and all these characters were living. They were living during the Civil War. Things were upside down. They didn't know what direction the United States was going to go in. They didn't know what direction things were going to be going in. And the same with us today. Life is unpredictable sometimes. Things happen. But we have to learn to flow with it and to make the best of it. We have to learn how to mature and sometimes to say no to things. And that's where I'm at. Like I said, I've said no to a lot of things. I want to live a simpler life. I don't have to go somewhere every single day. I don't have to travel and all that to be content. I can be content at home, doing the things that I enjoy, and realizing that to others it may seem mundane, but to me it's comforting. And so it's so nice to be able to have that and to be able to do that. And so life is what you make it. So number 4 was they stood their grounds on convictions. They weren't afraid to say no. They weren't afraid to stand and be strong in spite of what other people thought. And there was an example of Marmee speaking to, and I wrote down Beth, but it wasn't Beth. So Marmee speaking to Meg after her party where she was dolled up. And I cannot remember the character. I should have wrote that down. But she was invited to a friend's home. And I think it was on the celebration of her engagement. Not Meg, but her friend, I think, had gotten engaged. And so her friend who was engaged wanted to doll her up. And so they put on makeup and they dolled her up in this really fancy silk gown and all that. And she drank wine for the first time. And so Lori had been invited as well. And he told her, you know, this is not really who you are. All the fancy and all of that stuff, all of the pomp and circumstance isn't really who you are. And so when she got home the next day, she and Marmee had a discussion about it. And she enjoyed being dolled up. She enjoyed being fancied up. But real life happens, right? And so when you come back down from that, you need to be walking the straight and narrow, right? So, you know, Marmee was kind of like, yeah, that may be okay for a short period of time, but when life happens, when you come back down from that, you need to walk life in maturity and be content with the simpler things, because things, you know, fancy things, expensive things, traveling, all that stuff, you may enjoy that for a short period of time, but what happens when all of that isn't possible? What happens when, you know, your husband loses his job or you lose your job? What happens when the car breaks down and things like that? What happens when your children are sick or you're a family member or yourself are going through health issues? What happens then? It's like we need to be content in the little things so that we can enjoy the big things once in a while, but know that our contentment doesn't lie in having a job that brings us a lot of money, or having a big fancy house, having a nice car in the drive. Contentment comes from knowing that no matter where you stand in life, you can stand in confidence and you can be sure of yourself. And then Marmee's conversation with Joe before she goes to New York, Joe's really frustrated that she didn't get to go to Europe. But now, you know, she's got an open door to go to New York, but you need to stay true to yourself in your adventure. You need to stay true to who you are in your adventure and not waver. And so you need to stand true in your convictions. And so their overall perspective of life was to enjoy the simpler things, be together as a family, be strong in your convictions, be sure of yourself, no matter which way the world goes, because the world has been turned upside down. And even then, during the Civil War, things were shaky. Things were turned upside down. You don't know which direction. You don't know if your husband or your son or your brother is going to come home from the war. We don't know from day to day what's going to happen. Life throws wrenches in our way, right? And so we need to stay true. We need to be strong in our convictions. We need to be strong in the Lord, really, because He's the one, in my own personal life, He's the one that's my strength. He's the one that has given me my convictions and my surety and of knowing who I am in the Lord. And it's not in my own efforts that life happens, but it's in Jesus Christ that life happens. Because if I try to rely on my own things, it's like the house on the sand, right? And the Lord is the rock. And if my house, if my life, if the way that I do things, if my whole perspective is built on the Lord, then I'm sure, I'm safe, I'm secure. And so in Little Women, I don't really know as far as spiritual where Louisa May Alcott was, but in the book, they had a strong family though, and they stayed true to their convictions. Even when Aunt March, had her little opinions here and there, they stayed true to their convictions. They were true to each other. They made sacrifices. They were strong. And that's what we need again. And, we need a country that is true to the Lord, first off, true to convictions, true to having strong families. And all of that stems from having Jesus Christ first in our lives. If we will continue that covenant, make that covenant with the Lord, we will be true to each other. We will be true in our convictions and our families and all that stuff. Our contentment will be in the Lord. No matter what comes our way, we'll be able to be content. And this was just a great book. I think I can't explain everything to you because I'll give the whole book away. But I think it's a book definitely worth reading. It's a book that causes you to think. And there's many quotes in the book that I think are really eye-opening and very thought-provoking. So if you're looking for a book that you can read to your daughter, I don't know if boys would be interested in reading it, but you're trying to find a book that you feel comfortable with your daughter reading, absolutely, Little Women is really a great book. It's a book that you can be sure is going to bring a lot of good things. So anyway, I never know how to end a podcast episode anyway. So I hope this spurs you to go out and either go to your library or purchase this book. Many, bookstores have this book, Little Women. Your library will probably have it. And yeah, just really take some time to read it because it is a great book. And I hope this spurs you as well to get into reading. Take a half an hour, take an hour, take, a slot of time out of your day and just enjoy reading a good book. And Little Women is definitely one of those. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode and just having some time to chat and have some thought-provoking conversation. So thank you so much for listening and have a great day.